Okay, I think we will go ahead and kick things off. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully, this will provide you some insight in um, the process for applying for SBA eligible programs. What we would like to first thank InMotion, uh, which is a accelerator program in Nebraska that Generator is partnered with. So a little bit quick background on Generator. We are a nationally ranked startup accelerator, and we are doing this program to help small businesses throughout the country, including startups and non-startups alike. We're here to help you guys out. So feel free to reach out to any of us for questions during this program. We would like to, again, thank our sponsors, InMotion, and also the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development. They have been a huge help in all of this. So with that, I would like to, first make you aware that there is dial-in information. So feel free to dial in if you're having trouble with audio. Sometimes the webinars are a little wonky, so make sure that you dial in if you cannot correctly hear what's happening. And with that, questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box. Myself, Danny, or one of the other co-hosts will help answer those questions either in the chat or towards the end of the program. If we cannot get to your question, feel free to send Danny an email and he will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Also, any unanswered questions from the Q&A box will be answered in a follow-up email after the webinar. So again, technology issues, we are recording this. So if you happen to, not be able to hear fully, don't worry, we have you covered. This will be made available on Generator's website, generator.com, and we under the emergency response program. So there will be webinar links on the resources tab for you to look at after this presentation. So I will go ahead and introduce our co-founder and partner at Generator, Troy. Troy has been doing a lot of research and helping small businesses the past month go through this process. So he's a great resource and we're glad to have him. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy.
Cool. Thanks, guys. I'm going to share my screen and then walk through the first presentation. So hopefully you guys can see the Google Slides Emergency Response Program. Look good. Cool. All right. So I'm not going to go in the present mode just because I'm worried that it will not work that way. So I'm just going to leave it in this view if that's okay. All right, so clicking through these slides, the first thing to remember is that the federal government really has essentially two loan programs that are eligible to most small businesses. When I say small business, that also includes sole proprietors, nonprofits, freelancers, artists, creatives, independent contractors, basically any permutation that you can think of as a business entity, and even if you don't have an entity, like I mentioned with an independent contractor or sole proprietor. There's essentially two main buckets that exist, and both of them have some affiliation with the SBA, the Small Business Administration. The first bucket that I'm going to talk about is the SBA Disaster Loan, also referred to as EIDL or Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The second bucket I'm going to talk about is the Paycheck Protection Program, also known as PPP. So there's really two separate programs. I'm going to talk about each of them, and then I'll conclude the session here talking about kind of recommendations on next steps. The first recommendation I'll make is that any small business owner should be applying, any and every small business owner should be applying for both of these programs for the time being. And the reason for that is, A, we don't know how quickly the money will run out. B, we know that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of startups are applying for these programs. So we need to move quickly and you want to reserve your place in line. And then third, we'll address some questions about personal guarantee, collateral, loan forgiveness. Is this a grant? Is this a loan? The reality is by the time you get your place in line, you'll be able to make those decisions in a more educated way. And so you're better off having had the option to either accept funding via these programs versus waiting to apply and then either having the money run out or just being so far behind in the queue that your name never gets called, or by the time it gets called, it's too late. So first I'm going to walk through these slides here. I also shared them in the chat. This is specific to the SBA Disaster Loan. Again, this is also referred to as EIDLE, or Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So a little bit of background on this. This was the first program that was available. One of the first national addresses that President Trump had was talking about making funding available and making states eligible for the SBA Disaster Loan. And so that's what this slide deck is going to go over. What this entails is that each state's governor had to petition the Small Business Administration to prove that there was a disaster. In this case, that was a rather simple process because nearly every business in every part of the country can show some economic loss because of the COVID-19 pandemic. What these loans entail is that for a for-profit business, you can get up to $2 million, and this is a loan, up to $2 million at a 3.75% interest rate. Nonprofits can get the same, but at a 2.75% interest rate. And these loans can be paid back up to a 30-year payback period. So pretty favorable terms, but again, that is a loan. That is a loan that must be paid back. The caveat is in the last paragraph here on this slide. For small business owners in all U.S. states, Washington, D.C., all territories, anyone that applies for this economic injury disaster loan can simply check a box that says that they are interested and eligible for up to a $10,000 grant. This is called an emergency grant that was part of the CARES Act. The CARES Act is the $2 trillion stimulus bill. What that means is that any business or nonprofit that applies for this EIDL loan can simply check a box, and that makes you eligible for up to a $10,000 grant. Now, that is a true grant that does not need to be paid back. So for that reason, I recommend absolutely everyone, even if you're unsure about the bigger loan, you should still apply for this program and check that box, because that is what makes you eligible for up to the $10,000 grant. So again, I think there's perhaps no better program in terms of the ability to get these funds out the door. And for that reason, we highly, highly encourage everyone to apply for that grant. Even if you get the grant, you can later turn down the bigger loan. So you can apply now. Let's say you are approved for the full $10,000 emergency grant. You can receive the grant. You do not need to pay the grant back. And let's say by the time you get processed for a loan, you can simply turn the loan down. That is completely legal and completely okay. So again, you should absolutely be applying for this program. On the next slide here, we talk a little bit more about the what they call loan advance or emergency grants. One thing to note is that some of you may have previously applied for this SBA disaster loan. Originally, the SBA had their old or legacy online application. That application went down, unfortunately, with the demand and the millions of small businesses applying. They relaunched it on March 30th with a much better and much more streamlined and much more simple application. So if you previously applied before March 30th, you must apply again in order to be eligible for the up to $10,000 emergency grant. So again, even if you think you're safe because you already applied for this, I want to be crystal clear that you need to apply again if you first applied before March 30th. So you need to make sure that you've applied via the new application process, and that is the only way to be eligible for up to a $10,000 grant. In this deck, I've also, in the presenter notes section, I've shared some notes as well. So if you're following along, you can look in the presenter notes section, or you can share this offline for your review. On slide 5, I give the direct link. This is the direct link to the SBA Disaster Loan, also known as Economic Injury Disaster Loan online application. To walk you through what this application looks like, again, I mentioned it's rather simple, so I wouldn't get too caught up in how this works. But this is the homepage. It talks about the process as an overview. First, you have to say what type of entity you are. Are you a business with fewer than 500 employees? Are you a cooperative? Do you have more than 500 employees? So basically, it just asks a series of questions. You need to choose one. Secondly, you need to check any of the following that are true. So for example, you need to confirm that you're not engaged in any illegal activity. You have to prove that no principal of the applicant with more than 50% ownership is delinquent on child support obligations. So there's a number of checkboxes that you must check depending on if they're true or not. When you get to the second stage, this is where it asks for your business information. So the business legal name as well as trade name. For most businesses, the trade name is the legal name. And if it's not, you would probably know that. You have to enter your EIN, employer identification number. If you don't have that, if you just operate as a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, you just need to put your social security number. It asks what type of entity, and then it gets into more specific questions. So you need to answer your gross revenues for the past 12 months prior to the disaster, and then cost of goods sold for the 12 months prior to the disaster as well. Those are really the only financial questions it asks. You don't even need to quantify what your economic loss has been, or at least not at this stage of the process. So in terms of financial statements, all you need to provide is the gross revenue for the 12 months prior to the disaster and the cost of goods sold for the 12 months prior to the disaster. You have to put your business address. It has to be a physical address, your email address, the date the business was established. If you don't know that, you can probably go to your state's Secretary of State, or it's a little bit different for each state, and you can search when your business was established for sure. You'll have business activity. That is a drop-down list. There's only so many selections to choose from. My advice is just pick the category that you think best describes your business. And then there's also a category called none of these. But again, I would try to think creatively as best you can in terms of classifying what your business is. The next stage is you have to enter the information of the business owners. So for most businesses, they're owned by individuals. So if you are the business owner, you would have to put your first name, last name, contact information, and then your ownership percentage. And you have to do this for every business owner that has 20% more ownership interest. So if there's 5 owners each at 20%, you have to list 5 individuals. If there's just one owner at 100%, you only have to list 1 individual. And again, it just asks very basic information like date of birth, place of birth, address, etc. Now, some of you might have businesses that also have another business that is a complete or part owner. So in this section, you would check the box under, is your business owned by a business entity? And so for some of you, the answer might be yes. So let's say, for example, another business entity owns 50% of your business. In that case, you would have to list the information about that business and as well as the percentage that that business owns. Going to the next stage, this is called the additional information section. There's a series of questions that you have to answer about, have you been convicted of a criminal offense? Are you currently suspended or disbarred from contracting with the federal government? So again, another series of yes and no questions that you must answer. It asks if anyone helped you complete this application. For most of you, I encourage you to do it on your own. But if you do need help, like if an attorney or a CPA or an accountant is helping you fill this application, you would need to list their information there. This is the most important part, this checkbox. There's a checkbox next to which says, I would like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000. Everyone, please make sure to check that checkbox. That's the most important checkbox that you can imagine in this application. So make sure to check that checkbox. And then to prove that they're serious about wiring you that advance, they require you to enter your bank name, your bank account number, and your bank routing number. So this should be for the business bank account. If you don't have a business bank account, again, if you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor and you use your personal account, that's completely fine. Just enter that information here for your banking information. Finally, you'll have to read and review the representations and the certification. Basically, it's making sure that everything is true and correct. Please make sure to read and review all those claims, and then assuming you agree to them, you check the box that say, I hereby certify under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States that the above is true and correct. At that point, it'll produce a summary. So it'll list all the answers that you've answered thus far. Please review that for completeness. If you need to correct anything, you can click the edit button. And then finally, you'll click submit. If everything is correct, you can just click submit. And then at the end, you will actually receive a confirmation number. In my experience, you do not receive a confirmation email. So don't be alarmed if you do not receive a confirmation email, but you will receive a confirmation number. And according to the law, they must advance you up to $10,000 via the emergency grant within 10 days of application. Unfortunately, and this has been a very frustrating point, no one that has filled this out yet, and many of whom have filled it out over 3 days ago, have received that money yet. So this is a frustrating point. We're hopeful that the SBA and the federal government can get the kinks worked out. In the meantime, again, this has been a very frustrating point, and we're hopeful that the federal government can get this worked out. And that's pretty much it. So again, this is the application for the SBA, Small Business Administration Disaster Loan, also known as EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and that includes the emergency grant of up to $10,000. If you can take the grant and you can decline the loan, or you can take the grant and accept the loan. And at that point, a loan officer will be in touch with you in terms of determining how you can get a loan of up to $2 million. All right, so jumping into the Q&A, the first question is, the expiration date on my application says March 30th, 2020. I should be okay without reapplying. If you applied via the form and process that I just outlined, that only went live on March 30th. If that was the process that you went through and it happened on or after March 30th, then you are all set and you do not need to apply again. If your process looked different, however, meaning if you went through the original online application, or there was a period of time where they even had you download PDF forms and then upload them, if that is what you did, you will need to apply again. You need to apply again via this new process. Next question is, there's been a lot of talk about the $10,000 advance or the emergency grant. I've also seen articles that have changed this to be $1,000 per one employee. Do you have any details about this? I've seen that rumor as well. I have not seen any formal guidance that says that, however. So at this point, I do not think that is the rule or regulation. And I do not know how they are going to determine the up to $10,000 part. Some people believe they will just give everyone the $10,000, the full amount. Other people, as you indicate, believe it'll be based on some formula on number of employees. Regardless, you should take the simple step of just filling out this application so that you and your business can be eligible. That would be my advice. All right, so again, that was for the SBA Disaster Loan. The second thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm shifting to another tab, is the Paycheck Protection Program, also known as PPP. So this is a significantly bigger program with, for most businesses, this will be an even more lucrative aspect or program that you should be looking into. But again, I encourage folks to be researching and applying to both. The Paycheck Protection Program is also referred to as PPP. This is also a loan program from the SBA, but the funds are delivered and administered through private banks. So for this PPP loan program, you should be contacting your bank, the bank where you have your business deposit account, and asking them first, will you be participating in this? And secondly, if yes, are there any additional restrictions? So for example, this program only went live last Friday. And some of the big banks, like I'll use Bank of America, for example, they are processing applications. However, they're only doing it for existing clients. And not only that, but only existing clients that have a business loan or business credit card already in place with Bank of America. So in that sense, they're not doing anything illegal, but they're prioritizing not only their existing customers, but existing customers that already have lending or credit relationships with them. Now, there's other banks that I've contacted that are simply choosing not to participate in this program at all. Other banks which are only working with their clients. And we're starting to see some banks that are at least open to working with non-clients. So let's say, for example, my business has a bank account with a bank that's choosing not to participate in the PPP program. In that case, my advice is that you contact as many banks as possible in your community to see if they will take a non-client. And what we're finding anecdotally is that a lot of the local, smaller community banks are doing a better job at getting these loans processed. So my advice would be trying to contact one of those local community banks to see if they will process your application, even if you're not a client currently. At a high level, what the PPP program provides is any small business, and again, that includes nonprofit. It will also include sole proprietors and independent contractors. You can apply for this program. You have to calculate your payroll on an annual basis and then calculate average monthly payroll. So first you need to look at your total payroll over the last 12 months. Use that then to calculate your average monthly payroll. And that can include employer paid contributions to health insurance and some other like 401k contributions that are employer paid as well. So calculate your total payroll over the last 12 months. Use that to calculate average monthly payroll. You'll put that into this box here, and then you multiply that by 2.5. So let's say your average monthly payroll is $10,000, including all the other fees and things that you can tack on. You multiply that by 2.5, and then in that case, you arrive at $25,000. So in that case, you are eligible for a full $25,000 via this Paycheck Protection Program loan. Now that loan, it is a true loan with a 1% interest rate and a 2-year time period. But, and this is the best part, the entirety of that loan can be forgiven, 100% forgiven, meaning it goes from a loan to essentially a grant, as long as you can prove that in the 8 weeks following your receipt of this loan, you spend all of it on, and here are the categories: payroll, lease or mortgage interest. Now this is commercial mortgage interest and commercial leases, and utilities. There is another column, but for the most part, that's not relevant. So again, if you spend the entirety of your loan within 8 weeks after getting it on payroll, lease, commercial mortgage interest, and utilities, and second piece is at least 75% of the loan has to be spent on the payroll bucket. So you couldn't get, in my example, $25,000 and spend all of it on utilities. You would have to spend at least 75% of it on payroll. Then you get the entirety of the loan paid back, or forgiven, excuse me. The entirety of the loan forgiven. Now, some people might ask, well, what if I'm a restaurant, for example, and I've had to furlough or lay off all of my employees because I'm closed, or I have no business, or my county or my state has shut down my business? Well, in that case, the purpose of this loan program is to actually rehire those individuals and pay them for at least those 8 weeks that are covered by this loan forgiveness. Even if they have nothing to do or they legally can't work, the purpose of this program, by virtue of its name, the Paycheck Protection Program, is to keep paychecks flowing to these affected employees. If you scroll down the rest of the application, you also have to list any owner in your business that owns 20% or more of the business. And if you have more, you can attach additional sheets. Similar to the SBA Disaster Loan, you have to answer a series of questions and attestations, basically proving that you need this loan. And then the final page, again, review and certify the information listed. And they will again ask you to initial. So you have to actually put your initials next to each of these certifications. The biggest certification is that current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. So again, you need to be able to certify, and that needs to be true in order for you to apply for this PPP loan. Finally, you'll actually sign and print your name, put your title, and then date of the application. Now, this is not an application that you then submit to the SBA, but rather it's an application that you will have to work with your bank, your private bank, in order to get this PPP loan processed. And again, the best part is that you can get the entirety of the loan forgiven as long as you spend all of it in the next 8 weeks after you get the loan on payroll, rent, mortgage interest, or utilities, as long as at least 75% of that is spent on payroll. So let me dive into the Q&A here. There's confusion about ELDI loan also requiring maintenance of workforce per Paycheck Protection. Could you clarify? EIDL, as far as I know, does not require, it does not stipulate where you need to spend that money, other than it needs to support the business. So EIDL does not specifically say you need to keep these people hired. Whereas Paycheck Protection Program, in order to get the loan forgiveness, you must prove at the end of the 8 weeks, you need to go back to your bank and they will ask you, you need to show proof and evidence that you actually spent it on these qualifying categories. And not only that, you need to prove that at least 75% of that went specifically to payroll. Next question is, if I have 3 LLCs, do I need to fill out an application for each one? The answer is yes. You will need to fill out an application for each one. And beyond that, for the purposes of the PPP program, you will also need to list, you'll need to provide a list or an addendum, what they call addendum A here, listing all the other businesses that you or the other owners of your business own. So if you own 3 LLCs and let's say you're the only owner of those 3 LLCs, you will need to not only apply 3 different times, one for each LLC, but for each of those 3 applications, you will also need to provide an addendum, what they call addendum A, listing all of those other LLCs. The purpose for that is what the SBA calls affiliation rules. In order to qualify under the 500 employee threshold, they will actually add all the employees of your affiliated businesses to see if you still qualify. So if each business has only 100 employees, even if you add them all together, in this example, you'd still have 300 employees and you would still qualify because you're under 500. But if one of the businesses had 400 and the other 2 each had 100, well then, based on the current affiliation rules, you might not be able to qualify because collectively you have more than 500 employees. Next question, if you aren't considered an employee, is payroll your draws as an LLC member? There's still some confusion about this, and we're still waiting, I think, on some more granular details. So for example, sole proprietors and independent contractors can't apply for this program until April 10th, so this coming Friday. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we're waiting on guidance from the federal government about what do they qualify as payroll. The advice that I've been seeing banks interpret it as is they will look at either draws, so what are guaranteed payments or draws that the business owner is taking from the business, or they may look at net income of the LLC in this example. So if you have a single member LLC and you don't run payroll, but rather you just take draws, they might either look at the total amount of draws to calculate the loan amount, or they'll look at the annual net income of the business. But we still need some more guidance on that. Wage maintenance requirements under PPP. So really the spirit of the law is you need to continue to pay all your existing employees as they would have been paid. So if you're a service industry business, they're looking to make sure that they're paid at least what they would as a base, so their wage plus any tips in that case. But you would also be counting not only the wages but also the tips when calculating the average monthly payroll. So you have some protection in that regard. And then again, they are looking for wage maintenance. So you need to prove that at least 75% of the total PPP loan is spent on continuing to provide payroll to all those employees that had been under your payroll prior. All right, I think that covers all those questions that we got there. We will be sharing these videos to the Generator Emergency Response Program website. We have a list of, we have a resource page where we'll include links to like the Google slide deck that I walked you through, as well as recordings of these various webinars.
And Troy, it looks like we actually had 2 questions come in right at the end there. First one being, what about you're a single LLC,
Sure.
owner of an LLC, and still apply?
Yeah, so if you're a single owner of an LLC, my advice is to apply now. Try to work with your bank today, because I would encourage you to be viewed as an LLC. You would check the box here where it says check 1 at the top of the PPP application. I would check it as an LLC, and then work with your bank on how they interpret the rules for determining payroll. Now, some single member LLCs might run payroll, and in that case, it's easy. But if you don't run payroll, then I think the 2 paths that I've seen banks interpret are either looking at draws and guaranteed payments from the business to the owner, or look at annual net income. The second question is, if you have multiple entities, are you able to file for PPP under one of the entities and EIDL under the other entities, even if the ownership is the same? The answer to that is yes. Although my answer would be every entity should be applying for both, just so you have all your bases covered. And then Steven says, so wait to apply as a sole proprietor. If you are a sole proprietor, I would still encourage you to talk to your bank right away, just to see if they're going to be processing PPP loans. And then secondly, a lot of banks even have a form that you can fill out just to kind of get your place in line. But legally, under the law, under the CARES Act, which authorized the PPP program, sole proprietors and independent contractors the banks can't start to process those loans until this Friday, until April 10th. So you will actually have to wait, but my advice is to go to your bank as soon as possible to make sure that they're actually processing these loans. And if not, you should then do your research to find other banks. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate the questions on this webinar today. Danny or Patrick, you want to wrap it up?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So, guys, thank you for coming today. We really do appreciate it. As Troy said, we will make this available to you either on our website, on Vimeo or YouTube. Also, friendly reminder, if you have not signed up for our one-on-one office hours, these are free half-hour consultations with someone on the generator team to go through more specifically each of your needs with regards to these programs and with anything that you need help with during this crisis. So I highly encourage you to sign up for those today. Danny sent that over in an email once you signed up. So go ahead, sign up there, and please reach out again to Danny at generator.com if you have any further questions. Thank you, guys.